Welcome to the Teacher's Toolkit for Literacy, the free podcast for motivated teachers and school leaders who want to inspire their students and school community in literacy learning. Make sure you subscribe to the show on your favourite podcast player, and for more amazing literacy resources, check out the show notes provided with every episode.
Hi, I'm Sharon, and I'm the host of A Teacher's Toolkit for Literacy. In every Toolkit episode, we bring you specific resources, tools, strategies, tips, techniques to help you in your job as a teacher of literacy. Firstly, we acknowledge and pay our respects to the Kaurna people, the traditional custodians whose ancestral lands we gather on. We acknowledge the deep feelings of attachment and relationship of the Kaurna people to country, and we respect and value their past, present, and ongoing connection to the land and cultural beliefs.
Welcome to another podcast, and in every Toolkit episode we give you specific resources, tools, strategies, tips, techniques to help you in your job as a teacher of literacy. It's all about helping you as a professional and develop choices in what you're doing in your classroom for the betterment of your students, and we hope we open some doors for you today. Now with our podcast, Sharon, we've had over 3,400 downloads.
I know, it's a bit exciting. Those numbers keep going up every week. So thank you for listening.
Yeah. And lots of members on our Teachers Toolkit Facebook group as well. That's been great because people can write in with their ideas and comments and questions. Fantastic.
And connect with each other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also today I wanted to talk a little bit about goal setting and how important that is. Do you think... Do you think it's important in what you're doing in your classrooms? I think it is a really important thing. And I guess even in our own lives, we do a bit of goal setting. My goal is to get our house painted eventually. It's just taking me forever. So I don't know how my goal's going. But
hence the laughter, because it's been a very long project, but you are doing a magnificent job.
Thank you. And also another great goal, I think, is to... in the classroom is to make some really great connections with our students, and how we do this is one of the topics we're looking at today. How do we make stronger connections with our learners, and how do we capture their hearts as well as their minds in their learning? And so we're so fortunate today because every second podcast or so we have a special guest, but we've got such an amazing guest today, Mem Fox.
I know, we've been dancing on the tables.
Welcome, Mem. How are you?
Thank you. I'm good, Phil. And I just want to say to all the people on the podcast, listening to the podcast, you better listen hard because I'm not doing this again. I am an old person and I am not doing this again. So this is it. Open your ears, lie down, put your thumb in your mouth and do nothing but listen. Okay, thank you.
And the great thing is they can go back to this podcast anytime and hear it again and again and again. So that's really good. So, Mem, we're talking today about, or before we go into the topic, what have you been up to lately? What sort of things have you been,
What have I been doing?
Yeah.
I have been, I'm about to welcome a new book into the world, which is coming out on March the 2nd in Australia. It's called Early One Morning, which is for very little kids. One of those books that you read to children who are about, 6 months to 3. So I'm excited about that. And since the beginning of the year, I've written 2 major speeches, one of which is already on YouTube. And I called it End of Life Presentation because I don't travel anymore. I don't speak at conferences. So I've poured my heart and soul into that. That was about literacy. And I've just written this last weekend, at the end of January, just finished, a major speech as a writer, which is also my last speech on that subject, and that's called What's the Point of Picture Books? And that will eventually be on YouTube, but that's for a conference in the States in mid-March, so don't look for it before mid-March. It will not be there. But I'm tired, and I've been working very, very hard, and I'm a full-time, when I say I'm a full-time grandmother, our daughter and our grandson live 2 streets away, and she's a single parent. So my life is really absolutely bound up in family matters, and I am, to tell you the honest truth, really tired, which is why I've done these 2 speeches so that I can just, it's like having an essay hanging over you people. Do you know what? Can you remember that at university? You know, you have this essay, you have this burden, you wake up in the morning and you think, oh, I've got to do, I haven't done, and now I've done this literacy thing, I've done the writing thing, and I'm over the moon. I am over the moon because after this, I can just be at home and have fun.
Yeah, and people can go back to the YouTube clip and have a look at it again and
Sure,
again, and
sure.
and the podcast.
You can probably make a link to that somewhere in the show notes too.
Yeah,
yes.
absolutely.
Fantastic.
So going back a step, Mem, everyone knows you as a fantastic author of children's books, but you are also an educator, which a lot of teachers may not know.
Not remember.
May not.
Because they may not have been born while I was teaching.
So you started off teaching,
yes,
and then into university, and
yes, I started teaching teachers in 1973 at what was then Sturt CAE, which then became submerged into. That's not the right word, but you know what I mean, into Flinders University. And so I retired from Flinders University. But the teaching I did at first was drama, and then in the very early 80s, I think it was even 1980 itself, the person who was teaching literacy at the college that I was at had a nervous breakdown, and the university couldn't afford to appoint somebody new. They had to appoint somebody into literacy who was already there for financial reasons. And I had been to many conferences as a drama person and somebody interested in literature, but I had never trained in literacy, and I had heard hundreds of talks about it, and I was totally inspired. Also from my personal experience of being a mother who read to a child, I was completely inspired by literacy. I put my hand up and I retrained. That year was one of the most exciting years of my life. And the people that I read, the people who taught me, the conferences I went to, the understandings I came to, just absolutely inspired me. And from 1981 until 1996, that was my job. I taught teachers how to teach reading and writing. And I loved it. I only retired because I had 2 jobs and I could not do them both. It was impossible time-wise to do them both. And I had to give up teaching because the writing stuff is as much a business as it is about writing. And so much of it was coming in every day that I didn't have time to prepare my classes. Now, I am an over-preparer, I have to say. I never, ever, ever wing it. And I said to the dean of the school, I said, I have to leave. I haven't got time to prepare, and I'm not teaching if I haven't got time to prepare. And she said, but you've been doing this particular job for 24 years. Why do you still need to prepare? And I thought, well, that's one reason I need to leave. You know, if the Dean of Education says that to me, you know, why do you need to prepare after 24 years of teaching? Yeah. I thought that's a very good reason to leave the university, which is why I left. I cried 3 times in my last class because teaching is the most fantastic thing in the world. There's so much laughter, there's so much fun, there's so much challenge. You see students at the beginning of semester being completely different beings at the end of semester. It's so rewarding. It's so fantastic. Oh, I feel like crying as honestly, I've almost got tears in my eyes just remembering it, people. You're so lucky to be in the classroom.
I agree.
Oh, my God.
And I'd love how you talked about learning. Right there, your own learning, and just how inspiring that is. You know, we talk often in the podcast about there is just such joy in read. There are people to read. There are conferences to go to.
Yeah.
There are people to hear. They're the people that, like, being able to access inspiring speakers and writers, professional speakers and writers who we can go, oh my goodness, I can see how that will work in my classroom. Yes, that validates what I believe about.
It's wonderful.
And that challenges me to think about. And so that whole joy of learning that you talk about.
I will be talking about joy more than any other word this morning.
Yes.
That's my key word, joy.
Yes.
Joy and pleasure, those 2 words Joy, pleasure and happiness, which can sort of, meld into one word, really.
Yeah.
Yes.
One feeling. But
Yeah.
joy, pleasure and happiness is what I'm going to focus on this morning.
So really, and I think we know that's the absolute gift that you are bringing here is about joy of learning and joy of teaching.
Yes. Oh, the joy of teaching. Ooh.
Yes.
And we've talked a lot about literature as being
Yes.
part of that joy.
Yes.
And another word we have for it is tantalising text,
Oh, nice.
because the children are really drawn to them.
Yes.
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 Because we can have texts and then we can have
Text.
texts.
Yes, there are various kinds of texts
Yes,
in this world.
So whilst, people might say, well, why do they need to be called tantalising texts? Well, because some aren't.
Yes, exactly.
And we want our children accessing and hearing and devouring
Beautiful.
that which
beautiful words.
tantalises.
Yes, beautiful words.
Yes.
Yeah.
So in the classroom, just thinking of the teacher now who's teaching today or tomorrow, using literature, just start with, say, read aloud. There are ways of just doing read aloud, and then there are really even better ways of doing read aloud. So
Right.
do you want to go into just
I do.
read aloud?
Hold me back, she
I do.
says. Yes.
I do. I was not free of sin when I was a teacher of teachers, okay? And I did what other people were doing, and it seemed a good idea at the time. And that was, before I read a book to children, I didn't do it with my own students. I modelled well with my own students, but I didn't teach this particular thing well. When you held up this was what we were telling people to do, hold up the picture book. Obviously, you're going to hold it up so the kids can see the pictures. Hold up the picture book and show the cover and talk about the cover and what it might be about inside and talk about the author. Oh, we've read that author before. We love him, don't we? He's so funny. And this illustrator's new. That author doesn't usually have that illustrator. And what is the title of the book? Shall we all say it together? Hattie and the Fox. There we are. Hattie and the Fox. What do you think it might be about? And of course, the smart kid will put his hand up and say about a hippopotamus, because he's clever and he's bored.
Yes.
So then by this time, the class which you wanted to engage with wonderful literature for a myriad of reasons, which we'll come to in a minute, the class you wanted to engage is still fidgeting. They're still rolling around the floor. They're still looking out of the window. They're still playing with the girl's hair in front of them, and they're still pulling the Velcro backwards and forwards on their shoes. They are not engaged with you. And you think, oh, well, I can't see that literature's working. But if you sit down in front of the kids and take from under your legs, because you're sitting on it, kids, I have got something for you this morning that I think is fantastic. It's called Hattie and the Fox. Hattie was a big black hen. One morning, she looked up and said, oh, I can see a nose in the bushes. If you cut out that introduction, do no introduction whatsoever, the story is always what will engage the children. The first line is what will engage the children. I have seen very noisy classes climbing off the walls, sitting still because of the rhythm, the sheer rhythm of a first line. Let's look at Possum Magic, for heaven's sake. I'm pleased with the first line. The first paragraph I'm pleased with. I rewrote the first paragraph alone 23 times to get it right. And it goes like this. Once upon a time, but not very long ago, deep in the Australian bush lived two possums. Their names were Hush and Grandma Poss. Grandma Poss made bush magic. Now, that tone, the rhythm of the words, I'm choosing all my own books because those are the only ones that I know by heart. But the tone of the language, the tone of your voice, getting into the story straight away, you will be surprised at, there are always, when kids are getting used to being read to, there are always what I call resistors. There are always resistors. But I tell you what, by the end of the story, the resistors have given in. They're listening. It is absolutely astounding. So that's the first thing I want to say. If you're going to read a book to children, for heaven's sake, don't do a long introduction. Don't teach. Teaching interferes with learning so often. It drives me insane. Are you with me? I mean, it sounds insulting. Teaching interferes with learning. But honestly, we do sometimes just get in the way of all the benefits that can accrue from a certain way of doing things.
Yes.
We need to step back a bit.
Yeah. And I think sometimes we don't trust ourselves and we don't trust the children.
Or the book.
Or the book. And we can trust all of those.
Yes.
Fully trust, because we don't have to, we can trust ourselves by not overcomplicating things. We can trust ourselves to bring this. We're doing the very best thing, aren't we?
Yeah.
Just by bringing
Just
this
bring
literature to them. We've done. That's the big piece. We should be saying, that's the biggest piece that I've done. I've brought this book, and the biggest piece that the children are doing is, right now, let's let this text in. I love Frank Smith's words where he says, letting the rhythm and letting the language sit on the ear. So, that read aloud is just so important, just like you've done there, that tone and that rhythm and that pace of bringing it.
I will mention immediately, before I forget, because, this is really important.
Yes.
One of the things that I was amazed by with my own students was the way they read aloud by the end of a semester with me. That way they read aloud was just beautiful. And I thought, how did they do that? Because we only did a 1 hour. Out of all of the semester, we did 1 hour on how to read aloud.
Yes.
But of course, what I had done was demonstrated. I had demonstrated and demonstrated and demonstrated. In that 1 hour, however, and I'll just quickly, it takes a minute. In that 1 hour, I did demonstrate that the first line is a fish hook and the children of the fish. You must get the first line right. The last line has to be said very, very slowly, and do not speak afterwards. Do not speak. Do not ask a question. Don't wreck the story by quickly asking a question. Let that feather fall to the floor. Instead of a golf ball falling to the floor and you coming in and saying, well, what do you think of that? Or just let the children speak first, perhaps. And if there's total silence, then of course you can speak and say, well, I really like that. And what I loved about that was this. What did you love about it, Brendan? Because I could see that you liked it. So what did you like about it? Now, one of the really important things about reading aloud is, of course, you've got to do it well. You do have to do it well. I've been in libraries where I've just nearly cried and thought, guys, girls, whoever they are, these are little kids here. For heaven's sake, don't you know how to read aloud?
Yes. Yeah.
And I think there are 7 things that you can do. And the author will tell you what to do. The words tell you what these 7 things are. 3 of them are contrasts, double contrasts, as it were. So you can go loud, which is, one thing that you can do. You can go soft, which always gets them in. But you can't go soft if the story's loud. You've got to obey the author. So you can do soft and loud. You can do high and low. So you're not always on a monotone with your boring voice, You can go high and you can go low and higher and higher and higher and low. And, you're not boring then. So we've got high, low. I've forgotten which I've said already. Anyway, I'll just do it.
Soft and loud.
Soft and loud, high and low, fast and slow. Okay. So obviously, when Koala Lou is going up the tree and she's going higher and higher and higher, she's desperate to win this Olympic thing. Higher and higher, she went higher and higher and higher, faster and faster and faster, until there she was, right at the very top. The author is telling you what the speed is. The author's telling you what the speed is. So we've got fast, slow, high, low, loud, soft. Those are the 6 things that you can do. And you need to stand aside from yourself as you're reading the book and say, am I being boring? Have I gone high at the right moments? You sort of need to practice a little tiny bit. You at least need to know what the last page of the book is, because I've seen people read and finish on the second last page. And I've thought, guys, this is actually one more page in this book, you idiot, you fool, you nincompoop. Anyway, so the other thing that you can do, the 7th thing, which works like a charm, people, in any speech, in any situation you're in, it's the pause. As soon as you stop talking, people think, what's going on? What's happening here? Oh my God. And their eyes are just absolutely fixed on the reader, whether it's a parent, whether it's a child, whether it's a teacher, whether it's an auntie or a carer in a caring society, a caring situation. The pause is fantastic. So please do read well. Don't read with just a monotone. It doesn't do much for the kids or for yourself. I want you to enjoy it. I'd love you to enjoy it. I love it when I'm in front of a class. I adore it. Not that I do it anymore, but when I'm in front of a class and I see them, just eating out of my hand, I want to eat them alive. They're so cute, their little faces. And that you can, there's a point in Kuala-Lu where you turn the page and Kuala-Lu hasn't won. She's come second and it's devastating. And I was in this state. There were 1,200 kids in front of me, flat on a gym floor. Can you imagine? 1,200 kids. Obviously,
all lying down.
Oh no, just sitting.
Oh, sitting
cross-legged.
Right.
In this gym.
Right.
With the famous author from Australia coming to speak to them. Of course, the kids at the back couldn't see or hear, but anyway, there were little kids in the front. Obviously, the youngest children were in the front. And when I turned the page, which I did very slowly, they saw me turning the page. There was total silence. And then I said, but she wasn't fast enough. And a little boy 2 rows down put his hands on the side of his face and pulled his face backwards towards his ears, if you can picture that. And he said, oh, jeez. It was just fantastic.
He was right there.
Jeez. It was just adorable. But it's the way you read. You just can't read. It's the way you read. And I know that after this podcast, you will never read in the same way again. You're going to be brilliant.
Yes.
Yep.
And this is for picture books and for
novels.
Novels.
Yeah.
This is whatever we're reading aloud.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Beautiful. That's just the ready to take away straight away. And I think when we've got something, little tool like that to reflect on, to say, am I using this? Am I using that? Have I taken advantage of that?
Yes,
Have I?
yes.
But the not interrupt, and you would also say that during the reading there isn't the need.
Oh, Sharon, I am nearly ready to scream. I am coming at this podcast as a writer as well as an educator.
Yes.
Okay?
Yes.
And those 2 hats that I wear have been very important in my kind of advice that I give to teachers. I am livid and insulted and upset and tearful and grief-stricken when teachers interrupt my books by asking questions or speaking during the reading. Sometimes when I'm reading to kids and halfway through a story, somebody will put up their hand, I'll say, at the end of the book. That's all I say, at the end of the book. Yeah. And I continue to read the story because I have worked for 2 years to write a story that is 2 pages long, and I have the rhythm exactly right. I have the right words in the right place, and I do not want that interrupted. I don't want that interrupted. I want us to just flow with the language. I write the language in such a way that kids will learn the language, that they will love the language, that they will use the language in their speaking, that they will use the language in their writing, that they will become sophisticated users of language. The language in picture books is much more highfalutin than the language of any novel for children. It is much more highfalutin. It has been, many pieces of research have shown this. It is much more sophisticated than the language that two normal adults speak together, speak to each other day by day. There are some brilliant words in children's literature that you wouldn't imagine kids could cope with. One of my grandson's favourite books when he was a kid, well, actually not that long ago, but he's now 11, so it must have been, this book hasn't been out for that long, I don't think, probably 4 or 5 years. It's called A Bedtime for Bear. I wish I could remember who wrote it. I think it's something like Betty Becker, but anyway, it's called A Bedtime for Bear. And Mouse comes over for a sleepover and will not shut up, and Bear can't sleep, and he's just going berserk because this damn mouse will not stop talking and he wants to go to sleep. And in the end, he just loses it, and right across the double page it says, "Will this torment never cease?" And I mean, the sophistication of that language, will this torment never cease? You know, immediately, if you've read that book many, many times to a class, even an older class, 7-year-olds, 8-year-olds, God, my husband and I love that book, we're ancient. We love that book. I mean, kids love picture books at any age, they love it. But when you've read that book a lot, then the joke in the classroom becomes, will this torment never cease? So when kids are, ratty and running around, the teacher can say, kids, will this torment never cease? We can use the language that the picture books provide, or the novels, the repetitions, the richness of language that comes into children's lives and teachers' lives and parents' lives, frankly, from picture books is just, it's absolutely astounding. I mean, I'm thinking of Winnie the Pooh, when Winnie the Pooh eats all the honey. And I know Winnie the Pooh is old-fashioned now and a lot of kids are not tuning in, but this is just something that I remember that I absolutely loved, which became a saying in our own family. He eats the honey and he's shamefaced, and I'm sort of accused about eating all of it. And he says, well, one must sustain oneself. And, my husband is so bad with chocolate and snacks and so on and so forth that I hide them behind the toilet paper and, in this sort of back of the tea towel drawer where guys never look. And, I find that he has discovered the snacks and he looks at me and he says, well, one must sustain oneself. I mean, it is straight from Winnie the Pooh, and that's just within our family. But can you imagine what this wealth, this river, this flood of beautiful language is doing in the classroom to kids reading and writing and their understanding of English? The more words they have, the more they're able to express themselves. The more vocabulary a child has in its head, the more nuanced that child is in its language. Little kids who can't speak at the age of 4 and 5 who come to school, they're still screaming and scratching and hitting because they're so frustrated because they can't speak. They cannot talk yet, and they haven't been read to. That is the problem. Now, we must assume, that many kids in our classrooms have not been read to. They haven't had the joy of it. They haven't had the bonding. They might have had everything to do, with Minecraft, Star Wars, and everything else. But they haven't been read to, and that is one of the greatest gifts we can give them. If they haven't had it at home, and even if they have, if they don't get it in the classroom, then that is a classroom taught by a criminal. I'm so sorry to be so bold. That came from nowhere, teachers. I adore you, I envy you, and I know you're not criminals, but please read to your kids, please.
Because, Sharon, we talk about lessons, starting with a read aloud or a shared enlarged text, and that's a way of, every.
Well, if we're going to work with our, if we're going to grow readers and literacy users, we have to have text as part of it. We just cannot. Tantalising text,
yes.
And we need to not only have access to it, but we need to have access to it to hear.
Yes.
So it is that there were all these things running through my head, as you're talking, like from community, the community we build through Read Aloud is so powerful, and it is that language. One of my stories is, the two sort of arch enemies in the class, rather than being in year 4, rather than interacting inappropriately, used the line from a story, well, are you being a friend or foe? So there's it affords us new ways to say things, and it affords us better ways to say things, but it gives us insights as well. It's...
Because, Mem, you say there's a higher level of language happening in a written picture book than 2 adults speaking.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, there is.
Yes.
Could I just go back to the hearing of it, because you've touched on that, Sharon. And I look back at my own childhood and wonder how I became I often wonder how I became who I am.
Yes. Oh,
what
I'm
happened
so glad.
to me?
I remember.
What happened to me,
yes.
right? And I happened to grow up on a mission in Africa. I was born in Australia, but I grew up in Zimbabwe. And, of course, and I'm about to turn 75 in a couple of weeks. So you can imagine, there I was back in the day, fortunately, with the old version of the Bible, the King James version of the Bible. So, I wasn't hearing it endlessly. My parents weren't religious maniacs or anything. They were actually on the mission to train teachers. But nevertheless, I heard a lot of the King James Bible, whose rhythms are faultless, Now it came to pass in the days when the judges ruled that there was a famine in the land, and a certain man of Bethlehem, Judah, went to sojourn in the country of Moab, he and his wife and his 2 sons. The rhythm is perfect. So I had the King James Bible. We also had in our house a huge golden wood, obviously false wood, a golden wood thing called a radiogram. And it was called a radiogram because you could listen to the radio through it, but you could also play LPs and any records on it. And my parents, I think they were worried about us growing up in Africa, and they really, pushed the sort of cultural side of our lives. And we had a lot of records of poetry. And John Gielgud, as a famous old actor, well, he wasn't old then, but he went on acting for 1,000,000 years in England. Very, very famous actor. He had the most sonorous, beautiful, beautiful voice.
I can hear it right now.
I would lie on the floor, obviously no television. I would lie on the floor listening and listening again and again. Cold coming we had of it. Just the worst time of year for a journey. Such a long journey. The way's deep and the weather's sharp. Very dead of winter. It's about the 3 wise men. And it just gave me the chills. Break on thy cold grey stones. I see, the rhythm of that language is amazing. It's just amazing. And then I went to drama school in London for 3 years and had to read and learn by heart all this beautiful language. Ear, 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 ear. It's the hearing. It's the hearing. It's the hearing. It is the hearing of the language. It's just the difference the hearing makes. And you can't read a school reader to hear anything good because it's not written in that way. It's not written by writers. In fact, it's absolutely a disengagement, a school reader, which is also a source of grief to me, but I can't change the world. And they're cheap, and I know why they're in schools. But if anybody thinks that they're going to learn learn to be literate happily through readers alone, then they're living in cloud cuckoo land, frankly. You have to balance the readers, which have a purpose. You have to balance the readers with the most beautiful words that you can find, and you will find those words in books written by writers who care where words are placed and who will bring an emotion to the reading. You have no emotion whatsoever in a reader. You never feel glad, you never feel sad, you never feel revolted, you never feel frightened, you never feel outraged. You feel nothing when you are reading a school reader. You feel something when you are reading literature. And we want to engage kids. We want to engage them. The emotions are what will engage them.
I remember being a young teacher and going to a workshop where you were presenting them, and you introduced like about 5 different books and you read them out loud, and your emotions in the reading was just transformed me as a teacher. I went back to Marrittville Primary and started to collect a whole lot of really fantastic books and made my own classroom library.
Phil, and I probably talked to you, Phil, at that point, because considering how old you are and I am, before I was a writer myself. I would imagine I had not written a book at that point.
You hadn't? No.
Possum Magic came out in 1983, and I had been a teacher, for 10 years.
Yes.
A teacher of teacher for 10 years before I became a writer.
Yes, and they were some of the most beautiful. I just can't remember one of the books. It was just such a beautiful book that you read. And one I remember, you just for fun, you just brought out that pop-up book, Haunted House, and you just showed that.
Right.
It's still on our shelf.
But you were trying to show just the beauty of and the diversity of books and the emotions that you could bring out of them. And it just transformed me as a teacher.
My grandson at the moment has gone back to a very tattered copy of a book by Raymond Briggs called Fungus the Bogeyman. It's so revolting, it's so disgusting, it's so repellent that, I sometimes say, I don't need any more quotes. I can't stand it. I'm going to be sick. And we're howling with laughter, We are howling with laughter. It's really, when I look back, it's an early graphic novel. We didn't know what graphic novels were then, but it's an early graphic novel. It is so revolting. And this 11-year-old found it on my shelves and is completely wrapped by it because the emotion of revulsion is there.
Yes.
There's a point in the Fungus the Bogeyman. There's a point in it.
Yes.
There's an emotional point. It's disgusting. It's revolting.
Yeah.
It's vile.
Yeah.
There has to be a point in a book.
Yep.
There's got to be a point.
So, Phil, after that conference, you were able to see Mem model. She introduced you to some books. Then, if teachers were to head off after listening to this thinking, what books shall I go and find? What would you advise them?
Well, in the olden days, I would have said go and talk to your school librarian. But, of course, they're a dying breed, which is really, really awful. I think that I'd probably go to the net and tune into some of the websites about teaching and books and so on, literature,
yes.
not the other sort of teaching that we know about, which is important, about phonics and all of those things. Those are very important also. But to go to the net and look at, great literature for 7-year-olds, great picture books for 7-year-olds. It's actually great picture books for 7-year-olds are usually great picture books for 12-year-olds.
Yes.
I can remember when I was teaching at Flinders University, and of course all my students were old, they were all at least 18, and some of them were 45. They were even older than I was at the time. And I would, when I first started to read picture books to these grown-ups, I think they thought that I was very, very weird and this was not quite right, but they'd sit through it anyway. They had to. It was a compulsory course. They had to sit through it. And then, within 2 weeks, as soon as I said, come and sit on the floor beside me, they were just, some of them, were footballers, with knees that, hit the ceiling when they were sitting cross-legged. It must have been so uncomfortable. But they, we all love a picture book. We mustn't be bound by the fact that a picture book seems to be for very young children. It's actually for everybody. Yes. It really is for everybody.
Yeah.
I hope people love them. The other thing, of course, is I don't want them to be killed either. I don't want them to be killed. I don't want people to look at Wilfred Gordon MacDonald Partridge, which is one of my sort of high art, classic, heartbreaking, books. I don't want a worksheet that then says, draw a line from Wilfred's memory to Miss Nancy's memory about, the eggs, the warm eggs, or draw a line to, or in this line, write the things that Wilfred remembered in the order that he remembered them. That kind of literacy, that kind of nonsense, which nobody is going to read, nobody cares about, doesn't advance us in any way. No writing advances a child unless the audience matters. No writing at all advances a child unless the audience matters to them. Now, they may adore the teacher. My grandson worshipped his teacher last year, absolutely worshipped her. And he would have done anything, to please her.
Yes.
Anything. Yeah. But we have to care about the audience. We do. Writing nonsense. I remember in one lecture, I had made a lot of paper planes, and the lecture was full. Lecture room was full, it was raked. And I had about 10 paper planes. And I said, I don't waste paper, These are not made from, blank paper. These are made of worksheets. And I'm just going to throw them to you. And I was throwing these paper planes into the audience. And I said, so in the future, we're not going to talk about worksheets. We're not going to call them that. We're going to call them paper plane material. And so if you come across a worksheet on teaching practice, just fold it. And somebody would come back from teaching practice and say, Mem, I wasn't quite sure, is this paper plane material or is this okay?
Mem, can you talk a bit about multiple readings of a book? That's a good thing.
Oh, yes, it is a good thing. The more you read a book, the more children pick up. For example, if you read Where is the Green Sheep once, it's better than nothing. It is certainly better than nothing. But if you read it many times, and especially if you have a big book copy of it, if you have a big book, that's fantastic, but not everybody can get hold of a big book of Where is the Green Sheep. But the more children hear the words and memorize without force, they just know. Yeah. Then they get the book themselves. They've seen the pages turn. There are very few. It's almost like a reader, Where is the Green Sheep, except it's 100% different. Yeah. They've seen which words are on which page. They use the illustrations. People who teach reading, some of the people who teach reading say, don't let the kids look at the illustrations, which is an insult to the book. They look at the illustrations. They know this is the page with the blue sheep. They get the rhyme, rhythm, and repetition. They get the prediction, which is incredibly important in reading, to get the strategy of being able to predict what's coming next. Yes. And the more they hear it, the more they remember it. And then when they've got the book themselves, they can pretend to read it. They won't get every single word right, but they can turn the pages and say the right words on the right page. And eventually, with explicit teaching, because I love explicit teaching as well, with explicit teaching, the children will be able to read the book. Let me explain some of this. For example, phonics. I love teaching phonics with Where is the Green Sheep? Because we have the SH sound constantly. Green sheep, 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 sheep. Where is the green? But where is the green sheep? 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 And we have the double E sound. It's God-given, green sheep for the double E sound. It is God-given because we've got green 1,000 times during the book and we've got sheep 1,000 times in the book. And, we're going to look at the double E on the board. It's going to be written. We're going to, try and get other words with double E in, like tree and so on and so forth. We're going to play with double E, and then we're going to go back and we're going to read the book from start to finish without interruption. We are going to point out that there's a double E. We're going to point it out.
Yes.
And we're going to say, who can find it on this page? Kids,
and
let's have a game.
People.
Who wants to go and find it on this page? Which one are you going to find? You're going to find double E or you're going to find SH? Which one are you going to find? And it becomes a game, and it's just joyful. I miss teaching so much.
all within the context of a great story.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Means
So,
something
I'm
and
not
full of
saying don't
emotion.
teach.
No.
I'm not ever saying don't teach. But beware of how you're teaching, what you're teaching.
Because you're actually capturing the children's hearts through the literature,
Hearts,
as well as
yeah.
the mind through
Exactly.
learning about the language.
Exactly.
But, yeah.
Exactly.
Yep.
Kids with lots of language find learning to read easy because they've listened to so many books. They understand language, they understand how the world works, and they understand how print works. And those three things, language, the world, and print, we all bring to everything that we read. Every single thing that we read, we bring those three things to what we're reading. So we predict what's going to happen. For example, if somebody was moving into a new city and they sent us a text and said, I'm still house hunting. I'm not homeless, but I'm still house hunting. We would never, ever read horse hunting because we would predict that it was house hunting.
Yes.
Because we know the way the world works, nobody hunts horses. We know from the print that it's OR instead of, that it's OU instead of OR in the word horse and house. And we know through language that, house hunting is what people do when they're almost homeless.
Yes.
I mean, everything comes to bear on that simple sentence in a text. We still use those three strategies every single time. It's never just the phonics. I think people need to know that.
Yeah.
It's never just the phonics. It's two other things as well.
Yeah, so that really empowers the young reader that they've got these three things
Yep.
rather than just one.
Yep.
Yeah, that's great. So multiple readings is just hearing the language and you can just keep going.
And the joy,
Yeah.
the pleasure of reading the book again and again. You read it in the morning, the kids have joined in and they've said, where is the green sheep? And then you read it again in the afternoon. They think, yes, we love this. And then the next morning you say, I know we heard this twice yesterday. We won't do it again, except just this once. Okay, we'll start with where is the green sheep? And the kids are wild with delight,
Yes.
I shouldn't be saying that about my own book. I should be talking about other people's books. But,
But
it's hard
the
for me
point.
to... Yeah, at the
Yeah,
point, yeah.
and the story becomes it becomes part of the classroom culture, doesn't it?
It becomes part of the classroom culture and it becomes an important part of the curriculum.
Yes.
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 It's not just the classroom culture, it's the classroom's curriculum.
Yep.
That's a nice distinction. It's both of those things, not one or the other,
No,
but that
it's
it is
absolutely
integrated.
it's inseparable.
Yes.
It's inseparable.
Yep.
Oh, beautiful. That's one of the pieces of gold, another piece of gold.
When I came into the studio this morning and you said some people don't know about reading aloud, because of who I am, because of my life in teaching, I actually could not believe your sentence. I could not believe that there are teachers who do not understand the importance of reading aloud and do not do it because they don't understand the importance of it. I was shocked. I truly was shocked. I thought I was too old to be shocked by anything in literacy teaching, but that shocked me. And if this podcast can do anything to unlock, that joy for teachers, I'll be so happy. Because it's a joy for teachers, not just a joy for kids. It's such a pleasure for teachers.
Well, it transforms your whole relationship with your children.
Yes, because there's laughter. There's so much laughter.
Yeah.
There's so much cuteness and giggles and...
And we're in a world where we've got so much children's literature.
Yes.
So much
Yes,
beautiful...
it's absolute explosion of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolute explosion of it.
But
Divine stuff.
And I'm sure
Absolute divine.
most teachers would be reading aloud, but there's also different qualities of reading aloud. I think, I think I was reading aloud in my classroom, but when I went to your workshop, I just learnt a whole lot more about making that an even better experience for the kids.
Yeah.
On my own website, which is memfox.com, I don't speak it, unfortunately. It was going to be too expensive for the website to do that. But I do have that brief sort of 1 hour lecture written on about how to read aloud well. I have it written. And, I sort of say, try this and try that. And I've got examples of high and low and fast and slow.
Okay.
Probably the same
wonderful.
examples I used with you, Phil, back when Noah was in his ark and floating about on the water.
In 1800s. And also, so it's enriching children's reading, the relationship with the teacher, with their class. It also affects writing.
Oh, Phil, honestly, how can children write well if they haven't heard from other people who have written well? It's impossible to it's just impossible. The nuance of language, the words, the vast words that you can choose. You can't write. You can't write well unless you've read well and heard well. It's impossible. It's just impossible.
And it's where you start to really apply your phonics, isn't it?
It is, of course. And kids learn the phonics by trying to write the words that they want, which is, we've all seen invented spelling, which is hysterical. But it's the way kids work it out, instead of, and so that's why they write hope as HOP, because they're doing the phonics and their little minds are really working hard and they're going, they're sort of going, they're saying the word hope, but they're sounding it out in such a way that it turns out to be hop, because they're not saying hop, because that doesn't make sense to them as a word for hope. That doesn't make any sense. It's no connection. They probably know that O can be O. One of the hysterical things about phonics, it makes me laugh so much. It also distresses me, and it's also extremely difficult, is to say that A is for apple. Is for about 10 different sounds. How dare you say A is for apple? You look at ache, you look at all sorts of words, and you think, come on, don't say A is for apple. It's nonsense. B is certainly for bat. But the vowels, they can be anything. They
Any
can
sound.
be any sound,
And lots of people, lots of children around the world lick your books.
Yeah, they do.
Why do they lick your books?
Because they go, their little tongues are hanging out, they're holding the pencil probably in the wrong way, They've got their hands sort of upside down on the paper and they're going, your books, and they write L-I-K. Because they're sounding it out as that,
Makes complete sense.
Yeah, and they won't correct L-I-K for unless they have explicit teaching, unless they have, they can see text. That's why the picture book must be shown to the kids. They've got to be able to see the print as well.
Yes.
The print is really, really important. And I get so mad with people who say Mem Fox is anti-phonics. Good grief, I used it yesterday, trying to spell the word presentation. I had about 10 syllables in it, and I had to break it up and go presentation. I had to break it up. Writers use phonics all the time.
Yes.
We can't get away without it.
Yeah.
I'm all for phonics. It's the way they're taught that bothers me.
And so important to have shared enlarged text. We used to do a lot more of that with big books and the reading together and showing particular words. And
of course, and I retired before all this happened. But now, because of whiteboards and smart boards, if I'd had a smart board, what I would have taught. Oh my God, I would have had a wonderful time. But you see, the smart board can now replace the big book. Yep. You could, as long as it's not, it doesn't dilute the pictures. Sometimes I think the smart board doesn't make it look as good as it does in real life. But nevertheless, we have no excuse now for kids not to see the print.
Together as a group.
Together as a group.
Yeah.
We have no excuse.
Yeah.
And we don't need to point to the words, by the way, until during the reading of a story. We don't need to point to the words because that wrecks it, because you're not reading as the writer wanted you to read it. But afterwards, then you can point to the words and say, then you go to the green sheep thing and say, this is, says E, and this says E, and this says E, and this says E. Honestly, how many E's can we count in this? Let's have a look. Let's count. And you go through the pages and you're counting the double E's, and the kids are getting it because it's a game, because it's joyful, because there's pleasure in it. It's not a drag.
Yeah. And you're all doing it together as a group, and
Yes.
you're focusing on this learning together. And then after that, they can then use those same strategies in their own reading.
Yep.
Also, it's great to have some sort of way of writing together, isn't it, Sharon, to have a big book sometimes?
Well, I've just been writing this other speech about what's the point of picture books. And one of my most famous picture books is a book called Time for Bed, which is still, one of my major selling books after 28 years or something. And I wrote Time for Bed because I was writing a workshop for teachers. And I was going to write two sentences, and then in my workshop, the teachers were going to finish the story in groups. No, we were going to do it together. We were going to finish the story together. It was a group writing activity. Yes. And I thought, perhaps, no, I'll start again. I had these 2 lines of Time for Bed. I was going to give it to the teachers, give these 2 lines to the teachers and say, these are 2 lines that you can do a group writing activity with. And you are going to write on the board. The kids are going to throw suggestions at you. You're going to throw back reasons why you can't say that or why you should write this and so on. It's a constant to and fro of information, and you're writing on the board. You are writing the end of the story together. You're writing the story together, not just the end of the story. You're writing the whole story. And then I thought, I wonder how difficult that is. And I used to do this all the time. If I thought something was difficult, I tried to do it myself first. And so I decided that we would do that in the workshop. We would write the story ourselves in exactly the way I wanted them to do it. And then I thought to myself, can you do it? Miss Fox, can you do this yourself? And the first 2 lines were, it's time for bed, little mouse, darkness is falling all over the house. And half an hour later, I had written Time for Bed. I said to my husband, I've written a book. And he said, you told me you were writing a workshop. And I said, yeah, I was, and I have. And I read it to him, and he said, oh, my God, you've written a book. And I had, and that was because I was planning exactly what you've described, Phil, this group writing activity.
Yes.
Where the teacher's writing on the board, or whatever, typing up on the smartboard, whatever. And, the kids are throwing out the ideas, and you say, well, we can't say that because that doesn't fit in with what we've said before. Or, well, that's an interesting word. No, you could say, well, that's not a very interesting word. You're like, what other words might, be for, scared? What other words might we use instead of scared? Scared's kind of boring. Yeah, that's great. Terrified is great. Frightened, that's good. What are we going to choose? Terrified, frightened. Terrified is, really frightened. Are they really frightened? Or is it, which word are we going to use that's going to paint that picture better? It's that kind of interaction. But that's why I wrote Time for Bed. Thank God for teacher workshops is all I can say.
Is it the only time you've, in preparation for a workshop, you've actually ended up writing?
I wrote another story while I was teaching a class. While I was teaching a class, I wrote a story in 7 minutes, which is still selling. It's a book called Tough Boris.
Oh, yes.
And I was talking in the one of my students was doing a workshop on gender in children's books. A young man, was doing this workshop on a tutorial on gender and how all the main characters in kids' books are boys. All the main characters, the ones who could act and be tough and, be adventurous and so on and so forth. And the girls were all wimps who were following behind. And, he was outraged by it. It was very, very adorable of him. This is the mid-'80s we're talking about. And I looked around this room. He said, I want you to fast write. I just want you to write the beginning of a story. And I looked around the room and I saw all these feisty women, 2 mature age women, other people. I thought, oh, they're going to write female characters as their main character. And this poor kid is just going to fall apart. His thesis is going to fall apart. And so when he said, I want you all to speed write for 7 minutes, just the beginning of a story, I thought, I'm going to write the most male story I can write to help him out, poor bastard. And the book I wrote was Tough Boris. And when I'd finished it and I read it to the class, they said, oh, you've written a book? I said, yes, I have. It's dedicated to the student.
That is
and
such a
Boris
glorious
von der
story.
Borch, the student was Paul von der Borch. I actually used his name in the story. I was so grateful to him.
Glorious. But there's something really important in there for us as teachers, is that we need to be having a go at this too.
Yeah,
And
because sometimes we
we're
ask kids to
writing-
do things that are boring or difficult.
Yes.
Too hard.
Yes.
Take too long.
And it's good for us to go through that process of, let me try that. What am I asking them to do?
Yes, exactly.
So what would that feel like for me to be doing that? And I think that is such a powerful piece, not from just reflecting on what we're asking them to do, but that actually when we try out some writing for ourselves,
Yes.
that we can actually find
Teaching
how-
points also.
Yes, yes.
When we do it ourselves, we can find lots of teaching points.
Yes, because how is this going to work? And going through those thought processes that we can bring to students to say, so this is the kind of thinking I had to do.
Exactly.
That may help
Yeah.
you with your kind of
Yeah.
thinking, or
Yeah.
I'm thinking aloud as I'm actually doing it.
In the year that I retrained in literacy, I belonged to a writing group of similar age people, we're all in teaching or education of some kind.
Yes.
And we got together once a week for about 14 weeks and we wrote something, anything, for each other. Yeah. And we learnt more about the teaching of writing from being in that writing group, because we learnt about the fear, we learnt about drafting, we learnt about audience, we learnt about length, we learnt about word choice, because we were forced to be writers ourselves. It was the suggestion of the lecturer.
Yes.
It was a suggestion of the lecturer that we learn how to teach writing by writing ourselves. This was before I'd written Possum Magic. This was 3 years before Possum Magic. It was fascinating what we picked up, because we actually wrote for each other. We learnt so much. We were so scared. So scared.
Was it out of that session that Jolie wrote
It was.
Saturday morning book?
It was. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yes,
Jolie was one of them.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that writing, and I wanted to make sort of a bit of a connection before I asked, well, how can teachers find, good books to read aloud?
No,
The thing
that's
is,
sorry. I'm just going back to Jolie.
Oh.
That is a different group of Jolies.
Oh,
Ours was Monday night. She has a huge group of friends that she's been friends with for ages. That's the Saturday morning.
oh, right.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
So, but I know from those groups that, yes, what we learn about being a writer from being a writer,
Exactly.
actually doing it. And
Yeah.
that's exactly what we want our children to be doing, is
Oh,
being the writer
yes.
and being the reader.
Yes.
So,
Real writing and real reading.
yes.
We might just
I'm just watching the time.
yeah.
We're all
One of the aspects.
I actually have to go in a
Yeah.
second. Sorry.
Yeah.
I'm really sorry.
Yeah, that's all right. One of the aspects of writing was length, and I think we've come to the end of the length of the podcast. So
Sorry, people.
that's all right.
I think we've
No, I
overloaded
think
them anyway.
It's been a lot. So
Thank you for listening.
Yeah, thank you everyone, and I think we've talked about capturing the hearts and minds of the learners, and also using literature, and it's all a really deep part of the curriculum. So
Essential part, fundamental,
Yes.
essential.
Yes.
Can
and
we-
if,
can
and
we
if
a-
it's not already in there, it's easy to put in.
can we ask you some quick questions, Mem?
Yes.
What was your favourite book as a child?
Snugglepot and Cuddle Pie.
What's your most interesting school story? Or
I went from the mission school, which was all black kids, because I wasn't allowed to be there because it was a racist country, and I went to a white school, And I spoke with an African accent. I spoke English with an African accent, and I was very bullied as a 6-year-old. And I wore shoes for the first time when I went to that school.
Oh, wow.
So that's my school memory.
Yes. How do you think you learned to read?
Because my mother read to me.
Best question you have to ask teachers? You love to ask teachers?
Are you reading to your class?
Best question you love to ask students?
Do you know why you're doing this?
Best tip for thriving in teaching of literacy?
Talk to other teachers. Talk to each other.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Fantastic.
Couldn't agree more.
And thank you so much for being here today. And we've just loved having you here, Mem. And thank you for your contribution to literature, to teaching, to everything that you've done.
It's very bad for me today. It was very bad.
Why is that?
It makes me so badly want to go back to a classroom. I can't tell you.
Oh,
It was terrible. As I was talking, it was terrible. My heart was breaking.
they are so adorable, children.
Thank you for having me. I'm talking about grown-ups as well, you know.
Yes.
I mean, it's
Yes.
just
Yeah.
teaching. Teaching. Man, you're so lucky, you guys. Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining us today. And please contact us on either our Facebook group or through our website, and subscribe to the podcast so that you can be informed about the next one coming up. But thank you, Sharon, and thank you to Mem.
Thank you.
As Frank Smith says, we learn from the company we keep. So we've learnt a great deal from the company we have today, and we hope you have too. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to the podcast. To make sure you don't miss any literacy learning tips and insights, please subscribe to our show on your favourite podcast player. At Q Learning, our literacy specialists draw on over 30 years of teaching and international consulting experience to deliver world-class learning solutions. We equip, empower and support teachers to become their authentic selves. To find out about upcoming webinars and about how Q can help you and your school, visit qlearning.com.au. And you can get even more amazing teaching resources right now at teachific.com.au. Stay tuned.